you'll get a copy of the slides as well, and I'll write it up into a blog post. All right, over to you, Chris.
All right, perfect. Well, my name is Chris Justice. I've been in the CMS space since 95, 96. I know it's hard to believe, but there was content before there was a content management system. I am a multi-exit founder and left my previous acquirer a few months ago. And one of the individuals that I helped with their own company back almost 15, 17 years ago invited me to join him on his endeavor. Now, what's interesting about this is that it's all about content, and it's all about links, and the company's been around for around 14 years. The company's called BL.INK. It was originally formed as Bud URL, where the URL is really kind of the truth of content, meaning your CMS may change, but your URLs need to be universal and perpetual. So today I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about BL.INK, what we do, what I believe is now kind of the next generation of content management and tracking, because we all know right now that there's some interesting things happening, not only with the GDPR, but also cookies. What we've relied on for hundreds of marketing campaigns are going to disappear. They're going to be forbidden. And certain countries, Denmark, they're blocking analytics of some things we've been traditionally accustomed to. Same thing goes with Facebook and Google. We don't get the same value out of those tools anymore. But there are things that we do get value from. And I don't believe that content is king, never did. Accessibility is. I have a refrigerator in my garage that's 20 years old, but it has a QR code on it. And as a content management loyalist, I sat on the board of directors for Joomla. But every time I joined a new company, they made me use a new tool. I fell in love with Drupal, and I built and sold a number of companies off of a Drupal API. I worked for Vignette and Magnolia, but every time I switch brands or switch products, I'm using a new CMS. But the information that existed in those CMSs were really it needed to live. You know, that there was either a product release version. That content never ages. It just, after a while, after that you manipulate it so much, it turns to stone. It's much like a manual for a product in a television that you have in your upstairs. You look for that manual everywhere, but if it had a QR code on the back of that television, you could go to the manual and realize that there was something wrong with it. The point that I'm trying to make here is that content does turn to stone, and we need mechanisms, not only in our CMSs, but also in other external systems that give us accessibility to that content 20 and 30 years after the content has been finalized and maybe shelved and archived. Companies get acquired all the time. Links must resolve indefinitely. That QR code has to resolve indefinitely. And you can't rely on one particular vendor to have that resolve all the time. Consistency has to be maintained in the organization for the creation of these links. And I'll give you some examples of that. But longevity is the key. I need to be able to pick up the manual for that model car I just bought at the flea market that has no manual but has all the parts, and I need to be able to reassemble a 50-year-old product that I purchased with just clicking a link. Now, what I'm talking about is really perpetual product tracing. I don't know if you know this, but the QR code was invented back in the early 90s, 1994. And there were subsequent creations and copies of the QR code. You may have seen a PDF 417. In the United States, we have a driver's license that has a PDF 417, the one here at the bottom. It has all my personal information on it. I can scan this with any normal app on the App Store. And it has all my personal data. First name, last name, phone number, email addresses. And no one could get the QR code right afterward. The Maxi code was developed by UPS, and it was limited to 92 characters, I think. Now the problem with that, and I'm sorry about the notifications there today, but 92 characters doesn't give us any attribution associated with the life cycle of that link. Aztec codes, they're limited to 3,000 characters. QR codes have 7,000 characters. We can start appending additional data to what's in that QR code, and you can include a number of different types of information inside of a QR code, but I believe the most valuable is actually a URL. And BL.INK, what we do and what we have done for 14 years is we take those short links and QR codes and expand them into something that is trackable and traceable. So for example, when you scan a QR code, I know when you scan it, I know where you scanned it, I know the device you scanned it on, and I can collect a lot of great metrics about the marketing campaigns that you initiate from the physical world. And I think that's one of the points I'd like to kind of emphasize is that a CMS has to be directly connected to your print management system. A lot of what we do are for big brands like Best Buy and Room and Board, and they print our QR codes on 1,000 posters, on billboards. People scan those and we track and trace that purchase life cycle all the way through till the final confirmation and invoice appears inside of an email or a print invoice. Coca-Cola is a great example. So if you pick up a can of Coke, you'll see our QR code, but that's linked to a smart label. So there's a specific company that's specializing in generating smart labels for products. And what's the challenge with the CMS, as you guys obviously already know, is that when you generate a link for a website, there's a good chance that that link over a period of time is going to generate a 404 because you've changed the CMS. You've modified something in the header to make it more SEO friendly. 1,000 things can happen. But if you're using a link shortening service and you're using a company like BL.INK or like Bitly, for example, there are tools that do this, but you can modify those links after they've been distributed and printed on 1 million different cans of Coke. You can reuse that campaign and change it over time. It doesn't go to Coca-Cola.com. It goes to something that is a more user-friendly type experience and something that can be managed and tracked more effectively. We do this also for Nestle. These campaigns are dynamic. They're generated by a core marketing group of international experts that also, based on the geolocation in BL.INK, will redirect that person to a specific campaign. And you see here, we've got an example of a campaign that's localized to a specific region. And if the person is actually in that region, they'll be redirected to this one particular app. Or if they're ineligible for a campaign or ineligible for a contest, it'll redirect them to an associated campaign that's specific to their geolocation. And with companies like us and others, you can redirect based on the device type and all of these other parameters, including your own custom parameters, to really direct them to the right page at the right location. So I believe, at least for right now, every CMS and every person creating content has to think with the QR code in mind. Every page, every product, every person, everything will need some sort of a mechanism to create a link between the physical world and the virtual world, because we live with these phones with us every day. We cannot remember links. We cannot remember URLs. I can't even remember my children's phone numbers. And I have other ways to connect with them now. I had to look this up on my cellular bill to figure out what their phone numbers were. So we're in an age of abstraction, and you see some amazing features coming out from WordPress now, and QR codes are a part of every page of our product, and they should be a part of every CMS, in my opinion. So with that, I'd like to have a dialogue on content management, tracking QR codes, ask questions, talk to you, and you'll see that the QR space isn't just around black and white codes. QRs are designed for error correction. So if you drop a cup of coffee on a QR code, it's designed to kind of automatically or magically assimilate that data into something a bit more readable,
Cool.
regardless of its damage. But it's also designed to be customized. You'll see this from Coca-Cola, Bank of America. We customize and make these QR codes unique. So thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much. As with some of our previous member calls, this is based on something we did in a peer group meeting. Specifically, you generously joined us for a West Coast group meeting about a month ago, where a couple in the room were really, really excited about the work here and also the Coca-Cola case study. I think one of the questions that you received was on the scalability of this. It's not just one person reading the QR code on a Coke bottle every other day. It seemed like it's a really, really high scale. Perhaps you can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so we have a lot of organizations that are using this for high volume campaigns. So think of us as like a Twilio for visual and short link communication. For one of the product campaigns we just launched last week, there were 450 million short links generated that were able to physically identify and link to the person that it was being sent to. So if we had a transaction or some affinity there based on the content we were sending through that short link, great, we tracked that. If the person wanted to be unsubscribed, again, we tracked that too. We're able to associate that identity anonymously and confidentially to a specific QR code or link, and then also take action on either their interest or their lack of interest in the content. So that was just one campaign, and we've generated billions, if not trillions, of links in the system over a number of different campaigns. So they could be on individual products, and you could do something that is more like a serial number on a product, or you could do a generic campaign that is a bit more open.
Cool. I can keep asking away. Thank you, Chris. Anybody else has any questions, comments? Please just jump in or write in the chat, or use that friendly Teams feature that you might remember from the pandemic where you can raise your hand. I can go one more, and that's you've been focusing on QR codes here.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you look at it from a customer point of view, enterprise link management, perhaps most commonly known from Bitly, is not a QR code, it's a short link. Can you talk a little bit more about the short link aspect of what you do at BL.INK?
Sure. So Bitly was or is a solution in this space. So the challenge is that we have these long URLs and we need some mechanism in which to shorten them. Domains for a while had a lot of value. You can see that I have actually purchased a 2-character domain, and that so that 2-character domain is now worth a lot of money to some people, but I use it for my Calendly link. And when I think we just lost Yanis, no? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, there. The URL that we shorten doesn't necessarily have to be something that's under the master brand. So let me explain. When you sign up for BL.INK, you can create your own sub-character domain. So if you were going to launch a campaign, let's say for election 2022, you could call it ELO 2022 XYZ, launch the campaign, execute the campaign with a series of short links against that, and then set those links to also expire. When you're launching a campaign for a Tesco in the UK, it could be TXQ47. It launches, it kicks off, and then it would expire over time. So the characters after that slash are that short link, and we try to compress that as far as we possibly can so that you're only using the minimal amount of characters that can be typed in. At the same time, we'll generate a QR code for that same thing, so that could be put on digital campaigns. We just did this for FIFA. So we launched a campaign for a brand I can't talk about. They scanned the QR code, and tens of thousands of people are simultaneously hitting that QR code and being redirected based on geolocation and device types to a specific landing page. So us as a business, we have a lot of burst traffic. So we'll have, millions of links that get resolved within a 15-minute period, and then everything kind of goes quiet. And then there's a trickle afterward. So as a business, those short links, the shorter we make them, the better. But they don't necessarily need to always be short because they can be coupled with a QR code.
Thank you very much. Andreas, do you want to comment on this? I think links are also an important part of what you do.
Hey everybody. No, actually, I humbly reject my comment, right? I think it's super interesting. We also deal with short links. We have a link shortener, but it's a little bit outside the realm of where I'm looking. So I'm sitting, learning, just watching you guys. Really good stuff.
That works. And for background, those of you who don't know Andreas, would you mind just briefly revealing where you are? Not physically, perhaps geographically, but...
No, I mean, I'm in front of Tivoli, Copenhagen.
Fantastic.
The Danish headquarters of Brandwatch, and I'm a product director in there.
All right.
Yeah. So dealing with social media, and of course, social media, giving, especially with Twitter, like there's a lot of short links going there, and we have our own little link shortener.
Cool. Thank you, Andreas. Thanks for adding that. Any other comments, perspectives, feedback, reflection? So you've been there, what now, 3, 4, 5 months, Chris?
Yeah, so it's I've actually known the founders for a long time, but yes, I've been there for 4 months, and one of the things that we're focused purely on is the standardization. So in companies like Nestle and Coca-Cola, they'll have a unified standard for link shortening, so that they can, if you were to use, for example, there's probably 8, 10 major link shorteners, but there's another 100 that you could potentially use. The challenge is some of those companies are no longer in business. Mm-hmm. The technology is no longer used. And then you lose the legacy data. So what we end up doing is migrating customers from Bitly and other tools into BL.INK, which is designed for scale. And when you're launching those campaigns, at some point you get so many CMSs. I mean, you remember this back in the 2000s, is that we've got 18 CMSs in use inside of IBM. How do we resolve that? Well, of course, we're going to choose one CMS, and we're going to go with Drupal, and that's going to be global and worldwide. And now we're migrating all this content, and we end up doing the same thing. We migrate a legacy of links and help customers with those domains so that those links will resolve in perpetuity. That link that you print on a product brochure, on a can of Coke, or whatever product that you intend on producing, needs to have a lifespan that equals the lifespan of that company. Mm-hmm. And you aren't going to be using the same CMS, but you will hire a company like us to make sure that you can transition from a legacy platform or something that's less compliant and secure, because that's the other piece. And it's that we've seen now with QR jacking, where you've got individuals that will put up QR codes that appear to be legitimate, and there's an authenticity process that has to be done. We monitor the QR codes and the links that are generated on our platform for a reason.
Cool.
The session description mentions quishing.
Quishing, yes. And that's the QR code kind of phishing and fabrication kind of. It's a relatively new term, quishing, but I like it. I need a T-shirt with it.
Was that you, Jam, that jumped in?
Yes, I admit it.
That's all good. That's all good. I was just looking for the session description. Where did we put that? But good times.
I think it was in the description.
Very good. Yeah, very good. So if we think about this from the point of view from a normal web person that's putting content online, Chris, how would this fit? So you did that prediction like 10 minutes ago that QR codes are going to come into the tools of choice, the WordPresses of this world and whatever else they're called. Would I have to do something different when I put that link in my product description on my website for my Swiss engineering company? Or can you talk us through how is the, there's the Coca-Cola, the Nestle's of this world, but I think the world has even more or lesser known, B2B firms that are producing widgets, whatever, with 5,000, 10,000 employees still. But can you take us through what's the impact for those people?
Well, I'll try. I think when we create content, there's going to be multiple ways to resolve and address that content. I mean, SEO, it only goes so far. We do our best searches, but there's going to be some other manifestation of that content, whether it's a short link, a QR code. It'll be printed on something, and you'll go back in one of your legacy files, and you'll realize, hey, this is something that I attended, I participated in, and I want to reconsume and readdress. The web in itself requires a level of authentication. So if we were to scan or click a short link, there has to be certification of that domain and the SSL cert. It has to resolve to a specific location. In some cases, a third-party provider like BL.INK is going to be managing the content and the redirects. So what we do is high volume redirection and that legacy content. The very first link that we generated 14 years ago is still visible today.
I remember Dean Barker was very impressed with that.
Yeah. And that's the level of integrity that you have to have as a link management service, because all of those marketing individuals will change, the CMSs will change, but our relationship and the integrity that we try to build between the companies is at a much higher level.
So if I'm working at some university or local government, I'll have BL.INK open in a window over here, and I'll say, this is our landing page for how do you get a signed up for the local elementary school, and then I'll use that in my text over here in WordPress or in whatever I'm using.
Correct. And then you'll feed the analytics from our system into multiple tools. And I think that's the other point I want to kind of touch on, is that none of us use a single analytical tool. We know the benefits and the drawbacks of Google Analytics and some of its legal limitations now, depending on the geography that you're working in. Mm-hmm. So we create and add attribution data to that QR code, and then push that attribution data into the URL. So when it's resolved and you pull data out of BL.INK, you can push that to Adobe Analytics, you can push that to Tableau, you can push that to Salesforce, and each one of the tools will give you a different dimension of the click resolution that's happening during that engagement. So remember those characters we talked about, in those different versions of the QR code. Mm-hmm. Turns out that 94 characters is not good enough to give us the data and the attribution that we need. Some of the other data matrix codes only have 2,000 characters. But when you really start to put the life cycle and the attribution of a product from its creation and manufacturing all the way down to its disposal and its sustainability profile, it's going to take a lot more information shoved into that QR code. And only the QR code can really absorb that. And we'll track the life cycle of that. And you can put as many touch points and additional attribution points into that as you want. And that's kind of the next generation of BL.INK, is that we want to make sure that there's no limit to the number of attributes that you can apply into that link.
Cool. Thank you, Chris. We're coming up towards the end. It's been really interesting to hear about infinite links and symbols. And I found the second bullet too, what is quishing and why should you care? But you also covered, I think, everything else you promised, the future of CMS, indefinite lifespan of links, but you also mentioned how links can expire and how that can make sense. Election campaigns could be one example, but I think I can think of a few others too. But it's really, really fascinating to hear about how this fundamental building block that we perhaps don't individually think much of as we navigate and do the tasks that we need to do throughout the day, but simultaneously also as we connect with brands and they try to make us loyal to them. It's all happening through interactions like this. Let me hand it over to Carsten in Leipzig for a question.
So just one question. Are you completely GDPR conform?
Yes.
Yes.
And I say that yes with an if and no with a but. And I say yes. If you look at our website, we have a very specific GDPR statement. And we do not collect any PII. And I can go into a bit more detail on another call. But it is my sole responsibility right now at BL.INK to ensure that not only are we compliant with GDPR standards and the changing regulations in Europe, but also to continue to adapt into the product mechanisms that individuals like yourself will ask us about, and we need to provide some reporting on and data.
Yeah, because in Austria, GDPR is much more strictly than in all the other countries in Europe. For example, Google Analytics isn't in Austria GDPR conform. And,
Part two.
Well, if you'll go to BL.INK/GDPR, this will give you direct access to all of our sub processors. We're looking and continuing to watch as the GDPR evolves and Schrems 2, Schrems 3. Compliance is something I have a personal passion about, and I got that passion from my previous company. So if you see anything that I've missed, that I've not checked a box on for the GDPR, you absolutely can tell me about that. And I'll get on it.
Thank you, Chris. And like you normally say jokingly, your last name is Justice. So do reach out, do continue the conversation. I normally say that also at the end of our other calls too. I hope this is the beginning of a conversation. It's really interesting to follow. I learned a ton again from our second call on this. Thank you very much, Chris, for finding time. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And here we are, right on time. I'll share the links, the slides, and the recording later on. But for now, enjoy the rest of your day and all the best.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Christopher. Thanks, Jonas.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Chris.